Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first of our Fall 2021 Lunch and Lawn Series. This program is sponsored by the Fairfax County Master Gardeners Association, which operates under the Virginia Cooperative Extension program of Virginia's two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. The Master Gardeners program has been established to share with the community science-based information from trained Master Gardener volunteers about gardening and horticulture topics. We're very excited to be here. From 12:15 to 1 every other Wednesday from today through the beginning of October for a total of 4 programs. Each session, we're going to review a few key lawn topics and answer questions from participants about lawns and weeds and other lawn pests. This program is being recorded, so please keep your microphones muted. If you have any questions that you were not able to submit when you registered, please enter them into the chat box. I'll be paying attention to that, and after we answer the questions that have been submitted, we'll do our best to get to those by the end of the program. We do need to end at 1, so if your question was not answered, we're going to do our best to get back to you by email. My name is John Krotzer, and I am a third-year intern in the Fairfax County Master Gardeners program. I'm also the moderator of today's session, and the Master Gardener panel that we've put together for today's topics include gardeners Susan, Kathy, and Nancy, as well as our Zoom co-hosts, gardeners Hillary and Jenny. Today's program is going to be divided into 3 parts. The first is our main lawn care topic, which is managing your lawn as an ecosystem. Followed by strategies to deal with 2 different weeds you may encounter in your yards this fall, yellow wood sorrel and the Virginia Copperleaf. Finally, we're going to do our best to answer your lawn questions, as I said, taking those we received during registration first, and if we have any in the chat box, we'll do those after. Again, being sure that we end by 1 o'clock. Okay, so panel members, are you ready to begin?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Susan, we'll start with you and your main presentation today on managing your lawn as an ecosystem. Tell me, before we begin, can a lawn be an ecosystem all by itself, or is it part of a larger ecosystem?
Thank you, John, and that is a great question. Well, as many people think, a lawn is a lawn is a lawn, but not really. A lawn's much more complicated than just that expansive green you've seen in front of and behind buildings and homes. And today I'm going to talk about managing that lawn as an ecosystem. So let's start at looking by the definition of ecosystem. Per the Merriam-Webster dictionary, an ecosystem is the complex of a community of organisms and its environment functioning as an ecological unit. It's also something such as a network of businesses considered to resemble an ecological ecosystem, especially because of its complex interdependent parts. In 1866, the German zoologist Ernst Haeckel coined the term ecology from the Greek oikos, meaning home, place to live. Originally, this term just applied to the homes of animals, but it was later expanded to include plants. Now, today, this term has expanded well beyond its biological roots to apply to all kinds of interrelated systems. Just focusing on the biological definition, we ask ourselves what comprises a healthy ecosystem capable of supporting a complex relationship of living organisms. Well, to have a healthy ecosystem, we need for plants and animals to interact and balance with each other and with non-living things such as soil, water, and rocks. We need an energy source, sunlight, which plants use both for themselves and for those that consume them. As those other consumers are themselves consumed or die, they're broken down and return as nutrients to the soil. Now, every ecosystem will have boundaries, and these are set by the living and non-living things in an area. So when you think about your own lawn and you think about these components, it's helpful to ask yourself if yours is a healthy ecosystem or does it exist as a monoculture and may therefore lack a larger balance and diversity. So what does monoculture mean? Again, focusing on the Merriam-Webster dictionary, we look at that first definition where we see that monoculture is defined as the cultivation or growth of a single crop or organism, especially on agricultural or forest land. or it's a crop or organism, or crop or a population of a single kind of organism grown on land in monoculture, or growth consisting of a single crop plant. So think about driving past a field planted in corn or soybeans. For row after row, in acre after acre, you see the same plants, all drawing the same nutrients, all needing the same level of water, all feeding the same insects or possibly no insects. You see no diversity, no balance, nothing to feed the needs of anything or anyone other than that crop and the consumers of that crop. Now think about your lawn. It's an expanse of that singular crop of grass, often grass that takes a lot of mechanical and chemical support to be maintained. Turf grass covers an estimated 62,500 square miles of ground. That's about 2% of the land space in the United States. So if you put all of these lawns together and compared that space to the square miles of the state of lawns would be 21st in the list, sitting between the states of Washington and Georgia. For point of reference, Virginia would be number 37 in that list. Lawns became a symbol of social status and financial success in the post-World War II boom of American home ownership of the 1950s. Lawns said that you had the time and resources to keep a beautiful, green, and perfect lawn. Today, a whopping $30 billion, yes, $billion are spent pursuing that perfect monoculture, green monoculture dream. So how is a well-maintained lawn a problem? Well, think about what it takes to maintain that perfect lawn. You face high maintenance requirements. These often create high pollution outputs. Think about what gas-powered tools mean in terms of pollution and how their exhaust impacts our environment. Such a lawn often requires frequent watering, which can stress our water resources, as well as create unnecessary runoff. A lawn as a monoculture has limited wildlife value. In other words, it does little in the way of habitat or food for insects, birds, and mammals normally found in a diverse habitat. Lawns don't always work where they're planted. Think about trying to grow grass under heavy shade or in a bog or drainage area. A yard primarily featuring a monoculture lawn may be beautiful in the spring, but how might it look in the dead of summer or winter? Does it provide interest 12 months out of the year, or is it only picture perfect for a few weeks each year? When you think about the lawn as a whole, and you think about the way lawns are maintained, you have to ask yourself if a healthy lawn really is a healthy ecosystem. In a study done by the Department of Geology at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, it was determined that a well-managed lawn emitted nitrous oxide, which is one of the most problematic of greenhouse gases. This study found that the carbon cost of lawn care practices and the nitrous oxide emissions meant that urban lawns were a net carbon emitter and actually worsened global warming. Per one of the authors of that study, Dr. Shanhui Gu, it was found that, as a general rule, the less management, the better. Less frequent mowing, fertilizer application, and irrigation. It's also a better practice to leave the grass clippings to add nutrients to the lawn rather than disposing of them at a landfill where they will emit CO2. So what practices can you implement to adopt a healthier and more ecologically sound approach to maintaining your lawn? We've actually covered many of the items that I'm going to review here in previous Lunch and Lawn presentations. So rather than listing those just in the resources, I'm going to also list them here and call them out. A good first step, select the grass that grows well in your region. In this area of Virginia, you're going to either select a warm season grass or a cool season grass. You just need to accept that you can't have both in the same yard with any success. In our fall 2020 season of Lunch and Lawn, the third presentation focused on selecting turf grass. This presentation can help you understand your grass options and which are better adapted to our particular region. Within the rules of your HOA or community, consider adopting a lazy lawnmower approach. Using this approach, you actually stretch out the time between cuts. Now, interestingly enough, a study done at the University of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Conservation, lawns mowed every 2 weeks had greater bee abundance. Who knew? Keeping your turf grass 3 inches or taller also helps your grass shade out unwanted weeds. As much as possible, avoid those gas-powered tools. Keep your blades sharp and try not to cut more than 1/3 of the height of the grass at any time. If you're using a gas-powered mower, it really is better to cut early in the morning or late in the evening to reduce the impact of pollution. Also, try to only mow when that grass is dry. Keeping in mind that the act of mowing your lawn can compact your soil. The more you run that mower over your lawn, the more compacted your soil will become over time, which is why it's a really good idea to aerate your lawn once or even twice a year. The first episode of our 2020 Fall Lunch and Lawn addressed aerating your soil. When you do water your lawn, be sure to water deeply, trying to water at least 1 inch each week for a stronger lawn. Now, depending on your soil, an inch of watering will actually penetrate about 4 to 6 inches. This watering approach during the spring and fall encourages really deep root growth, and it's that deep root growth that's going to help your lawn resist insect and disease pressures to keep it healthier. Watering in the early morning is better. Watering later in the day is less effective because the water evaporates more quickly, which can actually dry out your plants. If you must water later, it's better to water really in the early evening, but you do need to remember that doing that might increase your chances of developing a fungal disease as the lawn stays damp overnight. Also ask yourself if you can take advantage of rain barrels to water with saved or captured water rather than relying solely on drinking water, particularly for your landscape plants. A healthy lawn depends on knowing what nutrients are available from your soil for the lawn to use, and you can only know that if your soil is tested. That soil beneath your lawn is a dynamic environment, so it's constantly changing. As you add nutrients, you need to be certain that what you're adding is what your lawn needs. Soil testing was addressed in the second 2020 Fall Lunch and Lawn. Now, when you think about feeding your lawn, remember that lazy lawnmower approach because it works for fertilizing as well. Grass clippings and fallen leaves that have been shredded into your lawn can actually meet your lawn's nutrient needs. Also, consider mixing clover into your lawn because that adds nitrogen to the soil. Top dressing with compost adds valuable phosphorus. If you must fertilize, always follow the directions carefully, regardless of the type of fertilizer used. Remember, runoff of applied fertilizers can pollute groundwater. Applying fertilizer was our 5th 2020 Fall Lunch and Lawn topic. Weeds are weeds only when they're plants you don't want in your lawn. Depending on the size of your lawn, hand weeding might be impractical. Still, if you can build the health of your lawn, you will probably find that the grass makes those weeds less viable as it crowds them out. Before you reach for herbicides, think about whether you can fight those weeds in a different way. Now we ask ourselves, how can we overcome that obsession for that perfect lawn and maybe have a more beautiful and interesting yard? Well, first, think about reducing the size of your lawn. Can you replace that grass with a non-invasive ground cover, which typically is a native plant, or have trees and shrubs? Can you think about your yard as a 12-month point of interest, using those trees and shrubs as focal points in planting beds and incorporate more native or regionally adopted plants, especially when you consider that native plants are adapted to our region and often require less watering once they're established. This approach can encourage friends and neighbors to adopt these new practices. People are really curious when they see us doing new things in our lawns, and this can give you an opportunity to share what you've learned. Keep in mind that perfect lawn in 1950s suburbia probably led to neighbors mimicking those lawn care practices. A more ecological approach to the lawn offers us the opportunity to develop a more diverse approach to the care of our yards, and this offers many benefits. It invites more wildlife habitats into our space. We can think about creating play areas in our yard. Plantings can actually help cool your home in the summer or provide windbreaks that can reduce the cost of winter heating. We can reduce our dependence on our water resources by implementing a smart approach to lawn care. And we can reduce the pollution through less application of fertilizers and herbicides, as well as reducing the pollution impact of lawnmowers, weed trimmers, and leaf blowers. All of these things can lead to a greater appreciation for the various aspects of our yards. Now, these things are intended to bring into focus the way we approach caring for our lawns, since our lawns are really likely here to stay. We want to bring awareness and understanding of the need to move away from our concept of that perfect ideal lawn while encouraging its care as a larger ecosystem. The final talk of our series on October 6th will go into the benefits of a healthy lawn, so we hope you'll tune in for that one. Everything you do impacts the world around you. It might surprise you to hear that homeowners use 10 times more chemical pesticides per acre on their lawns than farmers use on crops. Think about the cost of that. These chemicals might kill the pests you want to kill, but they might also kill all kinds of life you didn't realize you were killing and really didn't want to kill. Those chemicals don't always stay where you put them. As it rains or you water, there may be runoff that carries those chemicals into our waterways, where they can impact the lives of fish and amphibians that are dependent on those waters. One of the things we need to always be aware of is that we're part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and our water runoff finds its way into those waters. Just imagine all of the chemicals, pesticides, and herbicides we can potentially introduce into this important watershed. It certainly warrants our attention and our careful use of chemicals. Now, before you spray or spread, think about all the lives below, above, and beyond the lawn, and ask yourself, if the price of green is worth the price of the life you might be impacting, yours included. As you might imagine, a presentation like this calls on information from multiple resources. And I've listed those here and on the next 3 slides. This was fascinating research, and I in no way exhausted all of the available sources of valuable information. Before I finish, I want to call out some things. This resource listed here, More Than Just a Yard, I found to be an interesting and informative guide for transforming your yard into an ecosystem, and it puts into practice the things we've talked about here. Doug Tallamy's presentation here on Nature's Best Hope, this is a YouTube video, is really interesting. The quotes on that very first slide were from this video. If you have time, I encourage you to watch this. I found these fact sheets really source of great information and kind of led me in a lot of different paths of research. And as promised, here are these links to our 2020 Lunch and Lawn series are repeated here, and these were referenced in the presentation. Thank you, and John, I will turn this back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. That was fascinating. One of the things you said during it that really kind of caught my attention was when you talked about leaving the grass clippings on. I do that, and I think it overall helps out a lot. But one of the challenges I have is that sometimes I have weeds, and that I feel like if I'm going to mow over them, that leaving the grass clippings will help spread the weeds. Is that something I should be concerned about?
It certainly can. Depending on the weed or the time of year, whether it's seeding, yeah, you do have to be aware of that and try not to spread the seeds or spread pieces of plants that easily perpetuate themselves through little tiny pieces. So if that's an issue for you, you do need to think about that. When you get to the point where you have eliminated those or have patches where those are not present, then yeah, leave your clippings there, or leave your take your good clippings and spread them to maybe places where some not so good plants are growing.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. One thing for participants that I want to just repeat, I don't know that I said it earlier on, but as the presenters are discussing links, they are going to be cut and pasted and put into the chat. So obviously you can't click on the presentation, but you can click on the links in the chat to bring you to these helpful places. Okay, so moving on next, we're going to go to Gardener Kathy, who's going to present to us on yellow wood sorrel. Kathy, before you start, one of the questions I always have is the thorn in my side of my own lawn are wild violets, and more than that, creeping Charlie. Creeping Charlie is keeps me up at night. How big of an issue is yellow wood sorrel in Northern Virginia?
I believe it's very prevalent. It is on the Virginia Tech Weed Identification Guide, so it is a common issue among lawn owners in Virginia, and you can see that it's across the entire country and in Europe and Asia also. So in some parts of the country, though, they do have different names for it. So it is definitely a problem. It is shown here on this slide, creeping up from a rock cover on the ground in bricks. Basically, it is prevalent in Virginia and is on the Virginia Tech Identification Guide that I'll talk about later. Genus and species are Oxalis stricta. The family is Oxalidaceae. Oxalis is Latin for garden sorrel, and oxa comes from the Greek for sour wine, and it does have a sour lemony taste that I'll talk about later because it is an edible weed. The stricta again means upright. The other names for yellow wood sorrel in Virginia are creeping oxalis, creeping woods, ehii, oxalis, and yellow oxalis. And like I said, there are other names for it in different parts of the country. We can go to slide 2. The growth pattern here is that it is a native North American plant. It's found in 46 states and in Eurasia, is considered a weed. It blooms in colonies from mid-spring through fall and is a native herbaceous perennial. On the left, it shows a little seedling starting. The middle and the right pictures show the leaves and the flowers that I'll talk about. It is low-lying. It grows in open fields, along roads, in outdoor potted plants, lawns, and around waste areas. It flourishes amid beans and tomatoes and is hardy in zones 5, 6, and 7 in Virginia. It's a late germinator and fills in turf spots after the broadleaf weeds are killed by spring herbicides. It blooms in colonies from mid-spring through fall. Next slide, please. We'll start here with roots on the top on this slide. The rhizomes are on the left and the taproot is on the right. The colonies arise from slender, tough underground stems, which is the rhizome there in the middle. The weak stems branch at the base and they sometimes root at the nodes on rhizomes. So the taproot is shown there and the rhizomes would be the ones that are going underneath the soil. The flowers there shown in the middle, there's one major flower, will grow 6 to 15, the flower and the stems will grow 6 to 15 inches tall unless they're mowed. Each flower has 5 heart-shaped petals held in an open cup, and that's about a ½ an inch across on the stalk. The flowers are single or in axillary clusters of up to 5 flowers. The lower right picture shows seed pods, which are the fruit that I'll talk about on the next slide. And so on the top there, you can see that leaf, and oftentimes that is a common name for these, is the shamrock plant in other parts of the country. The leaves are palmately compounds, so the leaflets radiate from a single point at the end of the stem that supports the leaf. 3 distinct heart-shaped toothless leaflets like clover. There is one leaf per node along the stem in an alternate arrangement. Each leaf is about 1.5 to 2 centimeters wide. The leaves are creased and they fold upward in half at night or when they're stressed or on cloudy days. And that's a process called nictinisty, which helps conserve energy for the plant. The leaf edges are smooth and faintly hairy. Mostly they're green, but some have a purple cast to them. The stems that you can see somewhat on the right there, they're generally smooth. Tiny hairs can be seen under a microscope, and you can see in that picture. The rootlets form from nodes along the stem. For the seed pods, the fruit is at a sharp, usually 90-degree angle atop the terminal shoot of a straight or ascending stalk. The capsule is about 1/2 inch to 1 inch long. When those ripen up, they open up and violently eject seeds like 8 to 10 feet from the pod, and that's called explosive dehiscence. You can see why this sorrel would spread so easily with the seed pods exploding like that, along with the underground rhizomes. This slide talks about the uses and control. Beware, because yellow wood sorrel does contain high levels of oxalic acid, which is toxic in large amounts. So people with kidney disease, rheumatoid arthritis, gout should avoid eating yellow wood sorrel. It does it. So a lot of people add it to salads for a slightly sour, lemony taste. Leaves can be used for tea. Flowers are used in the salads also, and the leaves and the stems both can be used for lemonade. There is a high deer resistance to it, probably because the deer know to be wary of it. It's easy to pull as a weed. The flowers would show children, the bright yellow flowers would show children exactly where to pull. The rhizomes also have to be pulled up, though. It's not enough just to pull the above ground plant. Post-emergent herbicides are somewhat effective. Most useful are pre-emergent herbicides, which control sorrels from seeds, but not from the rhizomes. The best control is to mulch or alter the soil pH, because they do like a neutral pH. So acidic or basic pH would be better for them. The slides 6 through 9 here, my next 4 slides are reference materials I used. On this slide, the Penn State site had excellent pictures and information, and the next slide also provided very useful information. I used all of these to gather my work. On slide 8, you can click on the left on the North Carolina State University link. It has topics on the side that you could click on each one to find out more information about yellow wood sorrel, anything you want to know. Slide 9 has the Virginia Tech link, which has a weed identification guide, common names used for yellow wood sorrel, and other information for Virginia gardeners. One other scientific name that I saw on there was that Oxalis corniculata, according to the Virginia Tech College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, which includes the Virginia Tech Extension Office that we work with closely as Fairfax County Master Gardeners. Thank you, and now I will hand it back to John.
Thank you very much, Kathy. The one question I have in watching or listening to your presentation, when you talked about the way that it ejects those seeds, it reminded me a lot of the touch-me-nots that I used to have so much fun with when I was a little kid in upstate Western New York. Are those related?
They nothing I read was related to that, although it was related to the nictinasty that I spoke about earlier, that helps it conserve energy by protecting itself. The leaves, I guess, on the touch-me-not fold inward and drop when they're touched or shaken, and so it's defending itself from harm and then it just reopens a few minutes later. So it is somewhat related to that, to the
Huh,
yellow
how about
wood
that?
sorrel. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
So great. All right, well, we'll move on now to the next weed. And I'd like to introduce gardener Nancy, who's going to present on Virginia Copperleaf. So Nancy, the question I have to start with is most of the, and looking over your presentation beforehand, most of the weeds that we normally deal with in Virginia are smaller ones that are kind of intertwined with the rest of the grass. But I understand that Virginia Copperleaf actually can be up to 3 feet tall. Is that right?
That's right. It's very obvious if it's been allowed to overgrow in your yard, but it really, at least in my yard, I've never found it within the lawn. It's always in marginal areas. It likes my daylily bed when it's between growth spurts, when there's bare spots. So it's not as horrible as it might sound. It's also known as three-seed mercury or Ecological virginica. It's a summer annual broadleaf weed in the spurge family. It can grow up to 3 feet tall, and it has no soil preference. It is found in disturbed areas, meadows, fields, woodlands, and shores of rivers or lakes from Maine to Florida, west to South Dakota and Texas. It's one of those benign weeds. Copperleaf flowers grow from the bracts in the leaf axil, where the leaf emerges from the stem. Each bract is green with 10 to 15 lobes arranged palmately with hairs along the margins. With each bract is a thyrse or egg-shaped form of staminate flowers that do not have pistils. Each thyrse is 3/4 inch long, and individual flowers are less than an 1/8 inch across. 1 to 3 pistillate flowers also form within the bract and are difficult to see. Each pistillate flower is about 1/4 inch across. Copperleaf's flowers are pollinated by the wind. The fruit of a copperleaf is a 3-celled seed capsule, with each cell of the capsule containing a single seed. You can see them here in the center lower portion where they're a lighter green. The seeds are oblong and rounded, and songbirds love them. Virginia copperleaf's leaves are narrow and oval, pointed at both ends with a serrated edge. They are 1 to 3 inches long, an inch or less wide. Young leaves emerge as brown or copper. They grow closer together at the top of the plant, so they give the plant a flat top look. There is a single erect green stem, moderately covered with hairs. On the right, you can see its single taproot with a secondary fibrous root system. It's very easy to pull up, and it's easy to pull because it's the only member of the spurge family that does not exude sap. Here are the important things to remember about the Virginia copperleaf. It is a native weed of the eastern half of the United States. It is not invasive. It can be managed easily by hand pulling and then mulching. No chemicals are necessary. It is resistant to drought. It is attractive to songbirds who eat its seeds in fall and winter. Its leaves are browsed by deer, unlike the oxalis we just heard about. It can be mildly poisonous to humans if you eat it. If you would like to learn more, here are a few of the sources that I used.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was very good. One question I have, having listened to that, is, you know, for something that's found so much through the East Coast, as far as west as it goes in Texas, do you agree with me that I think the state of Virginia should complain about having its name associated with a weed?
I think it's a claim to fame. If you have to have a weed, this is probably one of the most benign weeds you could have. The deer like to eat it. The birds like the seeds. It's easy to pull. You don't have to use any chemicals. So I don't mind seeing it.
I guess
Just-
maybe Virginia
just a-
creeper will continue to reign as the most unfortunately named weed.
I think so, easily.
That's great.
This
Well,
one
thank you.
is not that prolific.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. So if you'd like
You're
to go on to the next slide, we can conclude today. So questions, there were a few questions that were submitted. I didn't see any new ones in the chat box, but let me start off with one here. Will a cardboard barrier prevent Japanese stiltgrass seeds that are already in the ground from sprouting for multiple years? And per our conversation before this, I'm going to pass this one over to Jenny for her response.
Well, thank you, John. I don't know that Keenan is on today, but the short answer to his question was yes. And I was going to ask him if he had other long-term plans for this area, because it would require an annual treatment or annual preventative maintenance to actually eradicate the stiltgrass. But it is easy to take care of because it can be pulled relatively easily, even along large area, because it's very shallow and weak roots. And it's better to pull it with moist soil so that you get more of the roots, because it does propagate by spreading stems. New shoots come up from those stems and from its seed head, which kind of comes out around this time, late August, early September. So you really want to get it before it creates seeds, because there can be up to 1,000 seeds per seed head, and it can stay viable for a few years. So covering with cardboard and actually mulching on top of that to give that cardboard some weight will help kill the weeds. But it would be really good to pull as many up as you can, and then maintain your vigilance over the next few years. If you're not going to plant anything there, or if it's in a weed, or if it's in a plant bed, go ahead and mulch that to keep sunlight from activating the seeds and allowing it to germinate. And maintaining, if it's in the lawn area or an area that you are planning to have lawn, maintain a healthy, dense lawn so that it competes with and prevents the establishment of weeds. And that's also been topic of some of our prior lunch and lawn videos. So a lot of information there that you can use to get rid of this. Okay, John, back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question we have is this as follows. My neighbor said he was going to have his lawn aerated, and he wanted to know if I wanted to have mine done at the same time. Frankly, it seems like something I don't need to do, but he says I should have it done. I'm going to put new seed down regardless. So actually, I will answer that one because I went through this exact same thing last year as well. Although I was the neighbor who asked if my neighbors wanted to do it. So I think that aerating a lawn is a great idea. And I'll tell you why. The surface of your lawn can get compacted over time. We walk on it. Lots of houses now are getting renovation. They're putting bobcats and other things are going all over the lawn. You know, people are putting play equipment. It ends up getting very, very weighed down, compacting the soil, and particularly with clay, it gets very compacted. So when that happens, the mineral particles that make up the soil, they're pressed together so hard that they're not enabling oxygen, water, and other nutrients to reach the roots. So a core aerator, which you can see in the picture here, that pulls plugs out of the soil. They're about the diameter of a dime. You might have seen these if any of you golf. You see these sometimes there because they aerate golf courses a lot. And that allows water and oxygen to get deep down into the roots and help stimulate growth of new new turf, and the more turf that that you have, such as tall fescue, et cetera, whatever you're growing, zoysia, the more that you have there, the more healthy that you have, the less room there are for weeds to enter. And particularly if you're putting new seed down, and the fall's the time to do that, this can help that seed germinate better, enabling seed to soil contact. So I think aerating every year is a good idea, maybe every other year, depending on how healthy your lawn is. But if you've never done it before, I think it's a very good idea. Going to the chat, there is there's another question here. It says, identify possible causes for the dead areas of my lawn. They have tall fescue, no irrigation, sun most of the day. I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll let the other gardeners.
Well, can Thomas is on, John. Can we ask him a little bit about?
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, Thomas, you want to kind of explain what's going on?
Sure. Thanks for hosting this. This is pretty awesome. I'm really getting a lot of good information here. So I've got the back part of my lawn, actually the whole lawn, but we'll just focus on the back part. I noticed that it was getting some brown areas starting in around the mid-June timeframe, and it died back, and then it stopped like around early August. It stopped expanding, but I didn't irrigate that part of the lawn. I did apply fertilizer in the spring. I did overseed and aerate last fall, but I'm having trouble telling whether the problem is from fungus, whether it's from insects, or if it's simply that I didn't water it. And that's what I'm trying to figure out, how I can determine what the real cause is, or if I should just assume it's all that, start from scratch and try to prevent all that next year.
Well, there's a couple of things going on. Water is important, and for that deep root system that healthy lawns need, it needs about 1 inch of water a week. And if you hadn't been watering it, it could be the result, or it could be the cause of that collapse. But I heard you say you fertilized in the spring. And if you do that in the spring, there's a lot of lush growth that takes over on the top of over the ground, but under the ground, the roots are not growing. And so that again sets you up for a condition where you're not, your lawn isn't as strong and healthy as it can be, because that lush growth demands a lot of resources, like Susan was talking about, in terms of water and nutrient, and the roots may not be able to support that system. But, if you start watering it, it probably will start to come back. So, just give that a try. And I think you'd signed up for the home turf visit. So those gardeners, they should be able to help you assess that more accurately.
Okay. And the main reason I asked is I watered the front part of my yard. And the browning was more extensive, or the collapse was more extensive in the backyard, but I did water the front part of the yard and noticed the collapse was there as well. So I'll enjoy talking to the master gardener when they come by to take a look at my property.
Yeah, no, all good points to bring up to help them diagnose.
Great. Thank you for your question, Thomas. So we're getting about to 1 o'clock right now. I wanted to just wrap up here. If I can,